Well everyone, welcome back to the channel. Once again, we're going to be doing another still worth it video, and this time, you know what's funny with this specific phone? Last year, this was like the second device I ever reviewed in that 2019 year frame. This year, it's actually like the end of January and I'm just now getting to it, but regardless, this was one of my favorite phones. I'm going to say this in every video, it doesn't really matter, I say that about every phone, but we're going to be talking about the Samsung Galaxy Note 3 and seeing how it pretty much holds up in 2020. Now, obviously there's not really been any major updates since this phone's release, even probably since like 2015, there hasn't really been any crazy news. But regardless, it's always fun to go check these things out. And what's funny is back in the day when this thing was released back in 2013, I never personally owned it, but I was looking at phones like the Note 3 and the Note 2 and thinking, man, these are the phones that could potentially last you forever. Like, there's really not any major reason to go from this phone to like the latest and greatest like 3-4 years later, because this thing has so much going for it. And I'm kind of still in that same boat. Like, I think phones like the Note 3, even the Note 4, because of certain aspects of these phones, they could potentially last you as long as you need to, or as long as third-party development support is there. But it's still super crazy to me that this could potentially be a real thing with these phones. Now, this thing was released in 2013, and this year it will be turning 7 years old, which is pretty insane. And looking at the front, you can see we have a 5.7-inch Super AMOLED display. This panel is 1080 by 1920, the standard aspect ratio and the standard resolution. And I'll definitely tell you, like, the panel itself doesn't really feel that great. It feels very, like, of course there's glass on the front, but it feels more plasticky than anything else. Because this phone is basically built completely out of plastic, it doesn't really give that impression that it is a super premium phone versus something like even like a Galaxy Note 5. That phone feels extremely premium in this day and age, even though the Note 3 is probably more like, I like the Note 3 more than the Note 5 in a lot of ways. Now on the front, you can see we have the top and bottom bezel, but the side bezels were slimmed down a little bit compared to what we have now. This is huge, but at least it made use for some of that bottom bezel with that home button and the capacitive keys next to it, so that was really cool. Micro USB port on the bottom, a headphone jack on this phone as well. On the back, a single camera setup, but that back had something really awesome up its sleeve, which was that removable back and expandable storage. Those two things are probably some of my favorite things ever in any phone. Like, I wish they could bring these things back. It's just something that's so needed for so many phones and devices out there, and this phone supported both of those things, which is awesome. I love seeing that. There's no IP certification on this thing, but regardless, you still have a lot going for it. Even in this day and age, this phone has some things that most phones nowadays do not have, like that removable battery, even that expandable storage, which is super cool. So in terms of that and the outside, that really pretty much covers it. Like I said, no IP certification, no nothing like that, but for the most part, it gets the job done for sure. So that's something that I always like seeing. Now moving on to the software, this thing was released with Android 4.3 Jelly Bean. We were able to upgrade it to Android Lollipop, which was really cool. The worst thing though, this thing was still on TouchWiz, which is not infamous of being the best thing ever. It's definitely one of the if I can say one word that TouchWiz is, it's probably like soggy. I think, like, I hate that word so much, but that's definitely one thing where I think this TouchWiz UI in general is just so weird, and it was just soggy every way you look at it. I don't even know why I just came up with that like right on the spot. But software wise, I mean, yes, stock, you're completely outdated. I would not recommend anybody getting this thing and using it actually as a main device if you're going to keep it on that stock Android Lollipop TouchWiz UI thing. I would not recommend anybody doing that. However, what I will say though is that you can always go and custom ROM this thing. And like I said early on in this video, I was like, really, this phone can last you as long as you want to, as long as third-party support is there. And this phone, does have a little bit of a development community behind it, and that is one where I would say 100% I would recommend anybody who purchases this phone or is planning on getting it, I would 100% recommend you custom ROM this thing. You're going to be doing yourself you're going to be prolonging not only the life of this phone, but you're also going to be, having a better experience while using it. It doesn't really make much sense for me to recommend people buying this phone if they're not going to go and custom ROM it. It really doesn't make too much sense in that, situation. I think this phone, still has, in terms of the, what it has going for it, you have the removable battery, you have the expandable storage. So as long as the software is fine, then that's really the only issue. Parts to repair this phone are super cheap and everything like that. So if I were you, I would 100% recommend you, even installing like an Android Oreo ROM would do you much better than keeping it on stock Android Lollipop. Like, yes, both are outdated, but one is way less outdated than the other one. This thing is not getting security updates anymore either. So If I were you, I would 100% recommend you custom ROMing this device, rooting it, then custom ROMing it. I think I might have custom ROMmed one of them back in the day, but I'm not too sure. But regardless, I would 100% recommend you custom ROM it and be set. Don't worry about it ever again once you custom ROM it. So that pretty much covers it up in terms of software. Nothing else too crazy going on with it. No updates since it's been, stopped in 2016 or whatever when the Android Lollipop official came out. So that pretty much covers it there. Now, hitting on the performance, this thing was released with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 chipset, a quad-core CPU. Apparently, some international versions had an octa-core CPU, but this one had a quad-core, and Adreno 330 GPU. And there were 3 different models of the Galaxy Note 3, a 16, 32, and 64 gigabyte variant, and all those variants had 3 gigabytes of RAM, which is actually not that bad, of size RAM. I mean, now I would probably recommend people not to go below 4, but for this phone, when it was released, it's actually not that bad, I'll be honest. And what I can tell you about the performances is that, first of all, there's a lot of things that are already wrong with it because it's on Android Lollipop. A lot of the apps, there's still a few apps that are still supported. Obviously, a majority of them, you can always get the APK files online and go ahead and install them that way. But I think you're just missing out on a lot of what the newer softwares have to offer. And even though this doesn't really have much to do with performance, I just want to reiterate, go install a third-party ROM in this thing, and then we'll talk about performance. I might do a separate custom ROM video on this to talk about, how that performance is on this. But on stock, I mean, the one thing is just with the software, there's so many random background processes that are always happening that it really makes this device be bogged down in terms of performance. There's random bells and noises and random pop-ups going on all the time, and it just makes why don't they just go take a more minimal approach, remove all that bloatware, and just, you don't even have to be stock, but just get rid of all these background processes that are really bogging down the system. So in terms of the performance, whatever you're going to do with it, it's really going to be a little bit choppy and a little bit slow. Even though this thing does have a quad-core CPU and 3 gigabytes of RAM, those specs aren't really that bad even in today's standards. Of course, we have phones with 6 gigabytes of RAM and all that, but I think Samsung's really main huge issue is the software. So whatever you're going to do with it, it's going to get the job done for the most part. Gaming and everything is okay too, depending on the game. Games like Real Racing 3 do not perform well at all. So if you're planning on doing super high intensive 3D games all the time, this is probably not the device you're looking for. But for minor apps and minor games and stuff, I guess it's okay. It's not completely horrible, but like I've stated before, you're better off getting something else. And if you're focused on performance, this is probably not the best phone to get. So I think that pretty much covers it up in terms of the performance standpoint. Now, hitting on the camera, this thing has a single 13 megapixel camera on the back and a 2 megapixel front-facing camera. Now, what's really cool about that back camera is that you can actually shoot 4K videos, which is pretty cool. You can even do 1080p at up to 60 frames per second, which is awesome. Anytime I see a older phone like this one shooting 4K videos, that's super impressive to me. And the quality, it's okay. I think there's something wrong with every single Note 3 I've ever owned. The camera lens has always been messed up. It's either the camera lens or something within the camera. These parts on these phones specifically, they don't really age that well, which is really sad to say because, it does have that removable battery and other aspects that are removable and easy to replace, but the camera lens is always one thing that's never held up that well. But in terms of the quality of the photos and everything, I think it definitely gets the job done for the most part. You have a couple cool features built into the camera UI as well, the camera app, which is awesome. I love seeing that. So you do have that cool capability on this type of phone, so that's really awesome. That front camera is completely garbage though. I would not recommend anybody using it. But in terms of the camera quality, I think that pretty much covers it. Like I said, it's a camera. You have a camera on this device. It's okay for the most part, but you can shoot 4K videos, which is really cool. Now, ending it off with the battery life, this thing has a 3200 mAh battery. That's actually a pretty respectable battery size for this type of device. But the cool thing is, and the best thing about this phone, is that you have that removable battery. You can easily go remove it and expand that battery size if you want to. So even if this battery has degraded over time, which it definitely has, you can easily go get the replacement 3200 or get a 4, 5, 6, 10,000 mAh battery in this thing and be set. And that's honestly one of the best things about this device. All these new phones do not have any sort of ways doing this. I mean, the S series don't have it, the Note series don't have it. They removed it so long ago, but you had that capability on this phone like a Samsung Galaxy Note 3 back in 2013. So you have some really cool features, and that's probably one of the biggest highlights of this phone is that removable battery. This phone could theoretically last you as long as you want it, as long as third-party development support is there, you know what I mean? And that's one of the best things about this phone. And the way I want to end this video off and answer the question, is the Samsung Galaxy Note 3 still worth it in 2020? I I will say it's only worth it if you're willing to custom ROM it. If you're not willing to custom ROM it, then I would stay clear away from this thing. There's no reason to get this thing in 2020. There's way better phones out there, like a Galaxy S8 or even like a Note 8. I would rather you get those things than this thing. If you want a bigger size, go for the Galaxy S8 Plus, but there's really no huge reason to pick this thing up over other devices, you know? If you can get one for like $40 and you can custom ROM it, if you can get like an Android Pie ROM on it, then yeah, dude, that'd be really sick. But for what it is now, I don't think it's worth it. If you're not willing to custom ROM it. If you custom ROM it, then you're set, then I wouldn't even worry about it. But pretty much for everyone else, I would not recommend buying this. The lowest I would go is a Galaxy S8 or a Galaxy Note 8 or the Galaxy S8 Plus, either one of those. So if you want to pick up the cheapest Galaxy Note 8 or Galaxy S8, I'll find the cheapest one on Amazon and link it down in the description below so you guys can get it from there and help support the channel at the same time. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section as well. Hit that like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.